I'm Jeanette Abrahamsen, Vice President of Marketing for Sparks IQ and Trade Hounds. And normally when we do these interviews, I'm interviewing industry leaders in distribution or manufacturing or like social media influencers and like the electrical trade. But today I'm so excited to get to interview my boss, the CEO of Sparks IQ and Trade Hounds, David Bauders.
Hey, nice to meet up with you today, Jeanette.
Well, today I get to ask you a lot of questions about things that we've been working on behind the scenes. And I'm super excited because AI has been a huge topic for everybody. And we've been working on a lot of ways that we can implement AI in all of our businesses. So let's start by you explaining what we're doing to help use AI for business intelligence for Sparks IQ.
Yeah, so and really business intelligence for Sparks IQ, and it brings in a lot of the elements of Trade Hounds. So as many people know, we own two companies. Sparks IQ is our prescriptive analytics company that helps frontline manufacturers, distributors, their employees, their executives to make better business decisions to help them to optimize profitability, things like pricing, purchasing or rebate optimization, sales tools to help them grow share of wallet, expand their customer bases, and then profitability and cost to serve analytics that help them to not just make sure they're optimizing revenue and top line, but also bring it back to the bottom line. But also we own Trade Hounds. Trade Hounds is the largest social marketplace for industrial B2B and construction. So we have around 500,000 people who count on us on a daily basis to help them do their job smarter, to bring productivity to their work, and to really help the ecosystem to connect and sell and do more business faster and better and safely.
So tell me a little bit about one of the big initiatives that I know you've been working on for a long time with the Sparks IQ team. We already offer robust data analytics for manufacturers and distributors that are looking to learn more from all of the data that you're analyzing. So how are you now implementing AI into this new offering that's going to make it easier for our current clients and our future clients?
So Sparks IQ for a long, long time, over 30 years, has been aggregating transactional data from manufacturers and distributors. And these data, broadly speaking, are point of sale data. So they reflect who bought from them, what did they buy from them, what did their market baskets look like, what were their costs, what were their prices, their quantities. And all that great data has, broadly speaking, been internal data. So today, as we are looking at the possibilities of marketplace data and also of agentic tools, we're starting to think through how do we integrate the various solutions that we have, bring in a flow of market data to make all of these tools a lot smarter. So one of the things when we first started looking into the possibilities of agentic was how do we start to integrate, for instance, Sparks IQ pricing analytics, which we've marketed under the Price GPS brand, with our rebate analytics that we have in terms of SPA rebates that manufacturers provide to distributors. And one of the things we've learned over time, of course, is that smart pricing decisions depend on not only having a good pricing architecture, it also depends on getting the right cost from the manufacturer. So what we're doing is we're starting to really create this more, I would call it a more holistic approach to strategic pricing, where we're able to pull in manufacturer SPA rebate cost and pricing data to be able to recommend for a given customer what is the right cost basis from the manufacturer and what is the right sell price to the customer. So agentic for us is really bringing in a bunch of different prescriptive tools that we've had under the Sparks IQ brand, Sales GPS, which helps salespeople, whether it's inside or outside salespeople, to really understand their customers, to identify what are the most important conversations for them to have in the moment of need. How do we upsell, cross-sell during order entry or responding to requests for quotes? Those tools historically have kind of sat in different silos. And what agentic is doing now is creating the opportunity to really weave these solutions together. And then the last piece of it is really our Profit GPS analytics, which help our clients, manufacturers, and distributors to understand not just top-line gross margin, but also net profitability. And that requires us to have a robust view of cost to serve of customers and to be able to understand what is the net profitability of different product lines that we sell, net profitability of different customers, customer segments, sizes of customers, geographies, branches, all of those different layers of the marketplace. So the real value of agentic now is being able to measure net profitability, to understand what are the root causes of defects in profitability, and then to be able to focus the frontline employees on either changing pricing, requesting different cost bases from the manufacturer, improving the product mix or share of wallet with the customer, or maybe rationalizing the cost to serve. So it's pretty complex, and if you think about the traditional tools that industrial and construction companies used, they're using BI tools. And BI tools have a lot of strengths to them. In fact, the data that feed BI tools are extremely valuable. The problem with BI tools, traditional BI tools, has been that they don't really make it easy for the right people to get the right insights. So I think for Sparks IQ clients, really the most important thing is now they've gotten used to using ChatGPT and other generative AI tools in their daily lives. We're now bringing the discipline and structure of the Sparks IQ databases into a natural search type of an environment. And that the transformation when you open up natural search is really important because, for example, there are a lot of different personas in the organization who need access to good business insights. For example, you have pricing managers who need to understand where do they need to adjust pricing to win more business or to improve profitability. You have IT managers who are struggling with the question, how do we simplify our file structures that are supporting the business? You have finance people who are understanding how do we elevate our financial performance across salespeople, branches, all these different layers, vendors. You have the sales manager who have weekly meetings with their salespeople, but they don't have clear insight as to what they should be talking about at their sales meetings. Or you have sales reps who are going to be calling on a customer and they need to know what's the most important topic of conversation. Or which customers should I be de-emphasizing in my call planning versus escalating. So over and over again, you have the real need is to really understand the personas within an organization, to have the right underlying data, and the right brain, if you will, which is really where the Sparks IQ methodologies and proprietary metrics come in. When you bring all that together, you now have a tool that can basically help anybody in the organization be able to answer the right questions, have the right insights without being a librarian. And to me, that's been my quest personally, has been seeing the poor adoption of BI tools because we kept asking people who aren't librarians to behave like librarians. And that was unrealistic. And what we're seeing today is that with more and more people becoming comfortable with agentic queries, natural language query, that we're able to really unlock huge amount of insight and help people do their work a lot better.
I am so excited about our chatbot. I think that's probably one of the coolest things that I can't wait to promote. So tell me a little bit about the difference between this chatbot that we're offering and like a ChatGPT.
Yeah, ChatGPT is really just a general purpose AI. So it doesn't understand business context. It does it a little bit, right? I mean, it can, from what's available on the web, it can piece together and do sometimes a reasonable job. What it can't do is get access to a distributor's product offerings, for example. It doesn't know the customer segmentations that they sell to. It doesn't understand the different ways that they do business contracts, for example, versus system pricing. It doesn't understand the problem of overrides and how they wreak havoc on a distributor's profitability or a manufacturer's profitability. So what our tools are doing is they're integrating all of the Sparks IQ methodologies around pricing, profitability, purchasing, sales performance, sales analytics, bringing in a very, very well-structured set of business principles and data structure principles, and making sure that at scale, it can answer questions using very well-trained business logic. And that business logic reflects, really 3 decades plus of working with real companies on real problems. Most importantly, our tools are getting smarter with each use. So as different personalities in the organization, salespeople, sales managers, pricing managers, contract managers, IT people, finance people, as they ask questions of the tools are actually starting to integrate the perspectives of the different people in the organization. So that's another big difference. One of the things I'm also really excited about, Sparks IQ spent over a decade developing great sales training content. So we have a whole course and curriculum around buyer-centric sales training, modern sales foundations. We also have training around negotiations, how to make sure you don't get mugged by buyers in purchasing situations, or how to have a more value-based relationship over the long term. We have first-time manager training. We have sales coaching training. And what that's doing, what we're able to do now with these agentic tools is we're able to actually bring in all of the principles of buyer-centric sales training and start to actually connect that into the analytics and the insights. So for example, we can have a salesperson who wants to know how to meet with a particular customer, what to talk about when they meet with a particular customer, understand using principles of effective value selling, how to connect the insights from our analytics to the conversation, framing of the conversation with the customer. So that's going to be a really big deal because the general large language models, general AIs, don't generally have the ability to connect what I'd call prescriptive content. They have the good, the bad, and the ugly of what's out there on the web, which sometimes involves very selfish behavior. It involves a lot of, let's just say, coarse or unattractive ways of interacting with customers. And we're able to actually frame what a lot of the frontline sellers, whether it's CSRs, ISRs, OSRs, how they're engaging with their customers. And most importantly, on the background, they can actually get short form content that helps them really understand how to navigate that conversation. So there's so many ways in which what we're doing is different from general. I would say the most important is we're bringing a lot of expert content that's carefully curated and carefully integrated into a holistic tool that helps a salesperson manage their account of a book of accounts, their book of business, and to do so in a way where they're using a proven methodology for how they use the answers to questions or how they use the insights that will lead to a stronger performance system.
And the data that people are seeing in this chat, that's sensitive data about their pricing and information that has to be really secure. So talk to me a little bit about maybe dispel some concerns that people might have about how we're using the data and how they'll be able to trust that Sparks IQ is going to keep that safe and secure.
So we have a very robust data governance process. We are SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. We achieved our certification there. So in terms of just securing data, that's something we put a lot of energy into, and it's kind of table stakes in our business. I think the most important defining questions for companies using these tools is how do they define the roles, the personas of their users? So do you want a salesperson, for example, to know what the net profitability of your company is? So we have to have very clear mapping of roles in the organization. We have to have clear access guidelines, guardrails established based on the persona. A salesperson, for example, can get access to their accounts and their product mix, their market baskets, competitive price insights. What they can't do is start asking about, for example, vendor purchases, or they can't ask questions about the net profitability of the company, for example. So it's very much about configuring roles and defining the guardrails of how people use it. But I think companies need to really embrace that because it's really about, a lot of companies right now are trying to understand how do we scalably get our employees to use AI tools to do their work more effectively and more productively. What they haven't always known is, like, what does that really mean? Like, how do you do it safely and do it productively? And I think what we're doing now is we're giving them a very clear template for how to set guardrails and permissioning, that sort of thing.
What are some of the questions that different personas in a company might ask this chatbot?
Well, it's so interesting because it's one of those things where what BI tries to do, traditional BI tries to do, is it tries to anticipate all of the questions that are possible, which is, it is where we were, not where we are, but it is where we were. It was where we were. It's impossible to anticipate all of them. In fact, what makes it so transformative is that questions now are infinite in their variety. So, but there are obviously clear categories of questions. A pricing manager, for example, wants to understand their pricing methods mix. How much of their pricing is system pricing versus overrides versus contracts. They want to understand which branches should they be spending the most time with in improving adoption of pricing tools. Or they may want to understand where they have leaky contracts, where people set them up and they keep rolling them over and extending the expiration dates, and they want to make a difference there. A CFO, for example, may want to understand how to close a budget gap for profitability, or maybe they have a strategic investment opportunity where they need to generate $1 million, $2 million, $3 million in the next 12 months to be able to fund an acquisition, or to be able to fund an expansion, new branches, that sort of thing. This is where our agentic tools, for example, can help them understand how would they predictably achieve an X million dollar improvement across price, across rebates from their vendors, across reducing cost to serve, and to do so in the least disruptive way possible to the business. Those are very complex questions, and a typical BI tool really can't even start to dig in. That would require hours, really, to be able to work through all the permutations of customer, product, cost, price, sales mix, cost to serve. You just think about all the variables. These are really the strengths of AI tools, is their ability to work through permutation. One of the many strengths is to work through permutation problems. And these businesses are complex. A typical client that we work with serves thousands of customers, thousands of products, millions or tens or hundreds of millions of combinations of customer and product across, now we're talking about at least 4 dimensions: price, cost, cost to serve, and sales mix. You're getting into, chess level complexity, and most of the frontline or even the executives of these businesses are not grandmaster chess players. And we know now, of course, that the generative tools can even beat the grandmasters. So we're working at a different level of complexity and a different level of outcome.
And another way that I know we've been using AI, and you've been working really hard to innovate our market data solution. Talk to me about not only the chatbot that's built into that, but also that entire solution, what that's going to be offering for manufacturers and distributors.
So market data is really the most important frontier, I would say, for the companies that we serve. Everybody it's been a journey now, I'd say, for at least the last 10 years for companies to convert their own internal ERP data, their point of sale data, into optimized inventory, optimized pricing, optimized purchasing, lots of different, I'd call it business improvement levers. I would say the most important piece that's been missing over this period of time is what's going on outside of a manufacturer or distributor's own data. That's one of the pieces that's been missing. And Sparks IQ and Trade Hounds now are originating enough transactions in the marketplace that we're able to help people understand what's going on beyond their own data. And that's transformative. It's important for a CSR to know not only what is the pricing system telling them to price at, but it's also important for them to know how that fits into what the market price bands are that are observed in the market for a given customer profile, product profile. The other piece that's really interesting, that's been missing throughout all of this journey has been pre-commerce data. Pre-commerce data refers to the stream of activity that precedes a sale. So it's the request for a quote. It is the back and forth between buyers and sellers to navigate the purchasing journey, the buyer journey. And historically, quotes data for manufacturers and distributors has been a pain point. There's a lot of noise in the data. It's very hard for anyone to get a clear read on what happened with different quotes. Who won the quote, who lost the quote. Obviously, sometimes you know which ones you win, they convert to orders, but you don't know, for example, what parts of quotes got converted to orders with others. Where was the cherry picking? Or you don't know what were the reasons why you won or lost. So everybody assumes it was price when they lost. That's not really true. A lot of the times it's the one who quotes first gets the order, or the one who makes the fewest substitutions of product that meets the buyer according to their own specification wins the order. Or sometimes it's the one who gets the response to the request for a quote most complete. There's a lot of defects that buyers are frustrated with from their sellers. So what this pre-commerce data is helping us to do is to understand and benchmark the performance of a given manufacturer or distributor against others who are bidding on the same opportunities. So we can tell one of our clients, for example, how their quote response times compare to others bidding on the same opportunities, how their completeness and quality of their quote responses compares. How does their pricing compare? Not on specific quotes, but in general, how do they compare to their peer groups? And a lot of manufacturers and distributors haven't really understood. They believe every quote was competitive, for example. And as a result, they are constantly deviating from their system pricing because they think everything is competitive. That's because they just don't know what's competitive and what's not competitive. And with more of the pre-commerce data, when you're actively involved in the quoting platform from Trade Hounds, for example, we're able to better understand and guide sellers as to where they have price competition, how to manage price competition, and most importantly, how to focus the buyer on value as opposed to price.
What are some of the common mistakes that you see distributors making that cost them a quote?
The most important, I would say, reasons why distributors lose quotes, it starts with being slow to respond. I would say the other part of it is they haven't really focused on identifying what are the frictions in the buyer journey that they need to navigate. For example, if a buyer is asking you for a widget from manufacturer number 1 and you quote manufacturer number 2, there's probably not a big point in lowering the price. It's not a price problem at that level. It's more about understanding the limitations of your line card, what you sell versus what buyers want. They also spend a lot of time treating inbound quote requests randomly. It's like the first come, first serve problem. So they're not responding to the ones that are, let's say, most purchase ready. And that's a big problem. That means they're misallocating resources from live sales opportunities to speculative sales opportunities. There's all the other issues that I talked about, the incompleteness of their responses, not finding a way to get the quantities aligned with what the buyer asked for. It's really just a lot of rookie mistakes too. Right now there's a massive demographic shift going on, so sellers don't really understand how to connect their product lines with what the buyer is asking for. This is where a lot of AI tools will also help. But it's all the details. Honestly, that's where quotes are won or lost.
And how will the solution that we're working on for quoting help those distributors prevent them from losing that quote or maybe win it back when they otherwise may have lost it?
Well, there's a huge amount of wasted time that goes on both the buyer side and the seller side. And what we've really focused on with Trade Hounds Pro is how do we connect buyers and sellers and synchronize their activities that are needed for both of them to transact. So, for example, today, most buying and selling activity happens through email and voicemail and phone calls. And frankly, that wastes huge amounts of time on both sides. There's also a lack of visibility or transparency on both sides as to what the other party is doing in this dance that's supposed to go on back and forth. So when the buyer sends a request for a quote to the distributor, they don't know whether the distributor has seen it, opened it, is working on it, whatever, which creates uncertainty for them. They end up shooting off, duplicate quote requests to other distributors, not because they don't know who they want to buy from, but because they honestly don't know what's going on the other side. Similarly, when an inside salesperson creates a response to a quote and sends it to the buyer, they don't know what the status of the quote is with the buyer. Did they receive it? Did they open it? Are they evaluating it? Are they competitively shopping it? Are they sharing it with their team, trying to get feedback? So you have all of these friction points, and it's a two-way problem. And generally speaking, the big problem that we've seen in the marketplace is there are companies that create solutions for one side of the marketplace. There are solutions to automate order entry, to convert emails into bills of materials and to proposals. And then there's companies on the buyer side that are automating the process of procuring materials, integrating with accounting systems, trying to basically automate on that side. Each side is treating the other side as the slave in the relationship. And so basically you have one-sided optimization tools. What Trade Hounds is doing is optimizing it as a system. So buyers and sellers are inherently synchronized together, synchronizing their work, exchanging communication, getting out of email, getting out of voicemail, getting greater visibility and connectivity to the other party. And that's what makes for a smooth trading system. And the industry has been plagued by just inefficiency. The amount of effort that distributors spend, I saw a statistic recently, they're spending twice as much labor to process quote requests and to convert to revenue compared to other industries. And it's partly because of the complexity of what they sell. Partly it's because of just lazy behavior on the part of their customers, sending them garbage, handwritten napkins, that sort of thing. And then part of it is, frankly, a lack of synchronization between buyer and seller. There's a lot of back and forth in construction, industrial, B2B, in terms of really dialing in which products are needed, even understanding required delivery times. It's constantly shifting. Whenever there's not enough material on job sites, work stops. And that's very costly. And it's unpredictable how fast that will happen. So I would say that what we're really focused on at Trade Hounds is creating a trading system that's a two-way optimization problem that understands the role of each party as it plays out in a threaded way from one party to the other through the buying process, through the selling process, and connecting those two through technology, making sure that the parts picking on the part of the buyer is natural and easy. It should be voice to a bill of materials, or it can be based on their purchase history. You shouldn't have to go and dial into a distributor's e-commerce site to reorder products that you already know what those products are. You've already saved them. Why would you have to go log in and have to go through that process all over again? Or if you know that the job is taking place away from where one distributor can serve it, why should you have to go log into a new distributor's website? All of those connections already exist. All of the sales history already exists within our quoting tools.
What type of information are the distributors able to see in our quoting tool that will help them prevent some of those mistakes that you talked about?
I think the most important is really getting visibility. If I were to say there's two things that really make a difference in quoting, one of them is the ability to understand what the buying process is and where the buyer is in their buying process. So have they received the response? Are they sharing it internally? Have they shared it externally? Are they messaging either a given distributor or others to try to clarify, resolve concerns, answer questions? So understanding where the buyer is in the buying process and knowing when and how to engage buyers to, at the right moment, to nurture those quotes to revenue. The second piece of it is improving communication between buyers and sellers. So today, you receive a response as a buyer from a seller in email, it's in a PDF or it's in an Excel spreadsheet, or maybe it's just text in the middle of an email. They're wasting huge amounts of time because they have to look through. A typical buyer is managing 10, 20 different projects with, maybe 5 different distributors across all of those projects. You've got 50 different email threads that you're trying to manage. Email is not designed for managing complexity. It doesn't have prioritization in it. It doesn't have synchronization in it. And so the messaging back and forth between these parties has extreme amount of noise compared to the signals that are trying to be resolved. So what we're really doing is making the platform become the messaging hub back and forth, and to organize it in a way where it's much faster and easier.
And what role will the manufacturers play in all of this?
It's really interesting because the markets that we serve with Trade Hounds are multi-layered. So you have manufacturers who make products. You have sometimes rep agents, independent rep agents whose job it is to work market areas with their distributors and their manufacturers to build awareness and preference specifications with contractors or end users. Then you have the distributors whose job it is to stock and do a lot of the logistics, the selling of the products at the street level. Then you have the contractors or the end users who are buying these products. Sometimes it's generally subcontractors at that level, or it's the purchasing within factories within 4 walls. So you have all these different layers, and so what do manufacturers want to know? For example, manufacturers want to know how are their products doing before the transaction is actually sold. How much quoting is going on? There's this whole demand forecasting aspect of it, which is fascinating because manufacturers today don't know which products really to start ramping up production on or ramp back production on based on quoting behavior. Today they're basing it on trailing data around what's sold, but they don't know when the market is shifting. They don't quantitatively know when the market is shifting as to how they should be adjusting their own production schedules. Distributors typically don't know how lead times are varying. We've heard about this pain point repeatedly. It's very hard to get a systematic view across, several hundred manufacturers, across hundreds of product lines, thousands of product lines, how the lead times are varying. So our platform is able to really start pulling together these different parties. Rep agents, of course, bear a lot of the brunt of all of this. They're the ones who are fielding the complaints from distributors when lead times are inaccurate or extended. All of these different parties, they're supposed to collaborate on quoting opportunities, and today there's just no thread that really pulls them together. So within the Trade Hounds Pro solution, for a given quote opportunity from a distributor, the distributor can loop in their rep agent that they're working with, or they can loop in their channel manager from a manufacturer. Similarly, downstream, when you have contractors or end users who are buying product, they need to let know their field people or their floor level people that they've procured these products. So there's all these communication flows that today are happening through really archaic, time-consuming ways. The platform really, once you know all the different layers that need to coordinate and be aware of things get a lot simpler.
And we've talked about how you're leveraging AI in the form of chatbots for pricing, profitability, sales, market insights. But talk a little bit about the Trade Hounds and Trade Hounds Pro chatbot and the role that that's going to be playing moving forward.
So we use AI and chatbots extensively across all of the Trade Hounds offerings. So it can be things as simple as how do people in the field understand code requirements? How do they make sure that they're installing products safely? We've talked to leaders in the safety industry, and my vision is that every time a bill of materials gets ordered, that we're able to surface what are the important safety recommendations for those products in a very concise form. Top 3 things that people in the field need to know when installing these products. There's a lot of young apprentices now in the field that just haven't got all the training they need. There's no good reason now why we can't look at what's being ordered, and provide field users with safety guidance for the products that they're installing. Another common use of AI is being able to identify what are the products that are needed. These catalogs from manufacturers are extremely complex, thousands of part numbers, millions of part numbers as you scale it. Really helping using natural language and not hunting and pecking through catalogs to find what it is they need, even using images of products they need to replace, being able to take a picture, have it convert into choices of product that meet that need. Those are some examples. We also have some really cool tools now that help contractors to estimate the amount of time that it will take them to install products. One of the contracting is also an extremely thin margin business. The average contractor makes about 4% operating profit as a percent of sales. And labor is a huge part of that. It's generally 60% or more of the contractor's cost structure. So estimating correctly how much time it takes to install and learning from others, estimating mistakes is extremely valuable. So now we're starting to use tools to estimate labor time and to be able to crowdsource insights that help contractors to be smarter at how they price, how they resource things. There's other great tools that help them to propose to their customers and get paid faster. So one of the big pain points, depending on where you are in the market, is being able to propose and win business. And for a long time, contractors have used all the same tools that we've talked about before. It's email, voicemail, it's spreadsheets, Microsoft Word, QuickBooks. I mean, there's all of these tools. They're all trying to serve what we call the estimating the cash cycle. So basically, how do I quickly find out if I go to a job site, I need to figure out what is the bill of materials I need to be able to do the work, need to get pricing and availability from a distributor, multiple distributors to be able to serve that need to be able to factor labor, how much labor, and really getting more accurate, what's the right billing rate. A lot of contractors don't know in their market what is the going rate for labor. They sort of do, but they sort of don't. And we're able to aggregate that across lots of proposals and through market labor surveys. Then they need to be able to add in labor, overhead, and other costs that they have of serving the customer. How much should they do that? Very basic economic questions. Over and over again, the people are guessing at these things. In a very thin margin business, it only takes, being off by 5% all the time in a 4% business to go out of business. And so that's yet another application. So we're using AI to be able to accelerate and compress the whole cycle of proposing jobs to customers, getting approval for them, scheduling those jobs, doing the work, invoicing, and getting paid. That's the E2C cycle. And historically, contractors have really struggled with that. Their cash flow is poor. They're not able to bid quickly enough. Again, the one who's first to bid with end customers, is usually the one who wins. And a lot of them just can't get it done fast enough. So the whole economy really is impacted by all of the waste that we're talking about here across the ecosystem.
It's been really rewarding to get to work on all of these innovative projects, and it's exciting that we're getting to release all of these new features in 2026 that ties together Sparks IQ and Trade Hounds and really helps streamline everybody's work across the entire ecosystem. But before we wrap up, is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you'd like to share?
Well, it's so interesting because what's rewarding is when you work, like right now we have about 500,000 people who are counting on us to solve these problems. That's just our customers, the contractors and field people who use our tools. So we have a great opportunity and a lot of responsibility to really listen closely to these people and understand what are the friction points in earning money, being able to do their work effectively. We feel, firsthand, both the opportunity of the markets that we serve as well as the pain points of the markets that we serve. So our job is really to understanding, because of our decades of experience, how manufacturers work with rep agents, work with distributors, selling to contractors and factories and production facilities, employing workers, and serving end customers. Like, how do all those pieces fit together, and how can we reorchestrate work across this ecosystem to make it more efficient, to make it more economically valuable? And so, for example, we have new opportunities right now for a given quote opportunity that a distributor is working to be able to help loop in all of the people they should be collaborating with. You know, for example, the manufacturer channel manager or the rep agent who manages a given metropolitan area, to be able to loop in the outside sales rep with the inside sales rep so that they're seeing the same opportunities. Most importantly, to help them figure out which conversations should be happening that aren't happening. And this is where it gets very interesting, because we're orchestrating conversations that are value adding in the marketplace, people who need to collaborate to help buyers buy things more effectively, get the right cost support from the manufacturer, the right rebate in place with the right pricing from the distributor. This is really a multi-layered synchronization problem. And we're able now, as we build a unified buying and selling platform, to loop in people upstream from the seller, downstream from the buyer. And you finally have this end-to-end view and platform for communication and coordination. And I think that's what's most exciting is that for so long there have been little chunks of it that were optimized, but we're getting to the point now where we have the connectivity, the connective tissue across the ecosystem that will unlock just vast amounts of productivity and vast amounts of coordination that really move the economy forward.
Well, thank you for taking the time to give everyone a little behind-the-scenes peek at all the hard work that's happening and all the new features that are going to be coming out this year.
It is a very exciting time to be at Sparks IQ and Trade Hounds, because we've been working for so long, you know, really working with manufacturers, distributors, contractors. I mean, the amount of expertise that we have has been, you know, it's just been developed over decades, and you have to know the right people, you have to understand the problems. And what's been gratifying for me is to really be able, over long periods of time, to be able to get to know how this whole system works, and to be able to make a difference for these people that we know so well, to make work happen more effectively. You know, right now we know in the industrial B2B construction space, there's a huge talent gap. There's a labor shortfall, generally 20 to 30% understaffing over the next decade across these industries. The things that we're trying to do in these industries is so important. You know, it's from the Internet of Things to AI to data centers to resilience of the power grid to green, you know, becoming more ecologically responsible. These are all massive challenges, and they require more labor, but the labor isn't coming fast enough, and that means productivity's got to increase. You know, whatever that gap of talent is, we've got to have a better use of talent. And there's just so much waste in the way that things are done today. I'm pretty optimistic that the solutions that are coming forth, in large part driven by AI, but also driven by platforms that don't optimize little slivers of the problem, but that deal holistically with the value stream. Those tools will be able to remove enough waste and improve coordination that we can meet the needs of the next generation.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.